Hi, this is Loop Braider, and in this video tutorial I'm going to be teaching how to make a braid that was called the buck's horns braid. It was described in some 17th century loop braiding manuscripts, and it's a double braid that, but it's a double braid a little bit unlike the ones that I taught in my original double braid tutorials. It has a slightly different method of exchanging the loops at the end, and this slightly different method is very important for making the pattern. The pattern of the buck's horn braid, it's a bicolor loop braid, and it has here's a very thick, hefty version. It has a contrast line down the center that you wouldn't be able to get with the regular way of exchanging your loops. I'm going to be teaching this as a solo braider technique. It traditionally was done, this braid was traditionally made by two braiders working together. I will not teach the traditional method. This is my solo braider workaround, as in my other double braid tutorials. However, this Noemi, Speiser, and Boutrup call it an unorthodox loop exchange that occurs in the middle, and that's the reason for this tutorial, is to show this unorthodox loop exchange. So you start with, for the buck's horn braid, it's a color pattern as well as a method, so you're going to start with all bicolor loops, 10 of them. I have 10 set up here. Oh, let me fix my mini tripod for a second. I have 10 loops set up here, and I partially, we'll see if this tripod will will work. I couldn't find my regular one. So I have made part of this. I've done part of it. This braid is slightly different on the two sides. Both have a contrast line down the center, but there's a tiny bit of difference to the appearance. The way I make it as a solo braider is actually upside down from the way it would be made traditionally by two people, just because that is a little easier. I find it a little easier. When you're done, you just turn it over, and that's the upper surface. The way I make it would have been the lower surface, the way two braiders would make it traditionally. You can make it with the traditional upper surface on the upper surface, but the moves, I think, are a little less friendly. Okay, so I have the loop set up on my comb as usual. I will take off they're loose and able to slide. I will take off the rubber band and put them on my fingers. I have them spread out on one side so you can see them better, but I couldn't do that on both sides because they wouldn't fit. So I always, for whatever reason, I always start in my left hand loading them up. The fingers have to go in the same orientation as the prongs. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I shift them up to my thumb. Let's see if we can see that. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put the fifth one on. Okay, then I work them back so they won't fall off. And now the other hand. Here you can see the loops a little better because I've separated them all. So I put my first finger in, second finger. I never load directly onto the thumb because it's treacherous. It holds loops in a different orientation. Instead, I load them onto my fingers and then shift it onto my thumb the way I normally shift loops, and then it ends up in the correct orientation. Tighten. On the thumb, the upper shank of each loop is obviously upper on the fingers. On the thumb, the upper shank of each loop is the one, since it's hard to tell because the loop is held horizontally, but the shank that corresponds to upper, that will be forming the upper layer of the braid, is the shank of the loop that is closest to the other hand. So you load your bicolor loops onto your fingers such that all of the same color are up and all the same color are down. So I have all my dark shanks up and all my light shanks down. This on the thumb is up, up. Okay, so I will be turning this. This is like a solid rectangle double braid in terms of the turns. All the loop transfers will be turned. Oh, and this is the prerequisite braid for making this would be you would have to follow my regular double braid tutorials. This is the one with the quote-unquote normal or orthodox loop exchange. This one has an unusual, well, to us it's unusual. In its day it was, at one time in Europe it was the most usual way to exchange loops. Okay, so all the loop transfers are turned. I will be turning from above, which looks different on the thumb than one would expect, but they will all get a turn that if this was to be done by two people, they would be turning their loops from above. Okay, first move is turn from above. This is like a regular double braid. Place, second loop transfer. Again, this will make more sense if you follow my regular double braid tutorials first. They are prerequisite to this. In this tutorial, I am just teaching the loop exchange, not the actual move so much. I've already gone over the actual moves in my double braid tutorials. Okay, so third transfer, shift, place, last transfer. All of those were done with a turn. Now we are ready to do the loop exchange. The normal loop exchange would have been to place the right D finger loop onto the left D finger and lift the left D finger loop over it. I basically will be doing that, but I will turn the loop before I place it. So I'm going to turn it. It's going to turn in the opposite direction of the first loop transfers. It's going to turn up that way. And this is important. To do this braid, you must turn the loops in the direction that I am showing, or turn them in the exact opposite direction for all of them than the way I'm showing. So I'm going to turn it like this, place it onto the other finger with the black shank up, turned in that particular manner. Then I am going to reach underneath that loop and fetch the lower shank of the leftmost loop on the little finger and pull it off and over the other loop. Both loops got a turn. This loop went through the other loop, and now I'm ready to tighten. That is the crux of this unorthodox loop transfer, and it looks very different when two people do it as a team braid. It looks very different. You aren't even aware of the turn, whereas you're very aware of it when you're doing it as a solo braider. Okay, so I now have I've now done one move not one move. I've done one round of braiding, one row, I also call it, of braiding, and now all the moves will repeat. And after the fifth row or cycle of braiding, the loops will have all changed to light shank uppermost. The full pattern repeat is 10 cycles or rows of braiding, but 5 is a good number to count because that's the half cycle. That's when all the light shanks will then be uppermost. Right now only 2 of them are. And then you can error check after five moves. If one of your loops is wrong, you'll know you've made a mistake, and you can either undo or just turn it over, a fast, quick fix, and continue, rather than have the mistake proliferate down the braid. So I always count my rows if I'm doing a braid like this that isn't a single color where the pattern repeats. So that was the first row or cycle, and here comes the second row. So I'm going to go through 2, turn from above, place, 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 and now the unorthodox exchange. I turn this loop up, place it on the other finger, and I reach underneath, get the lower shank of the back loop, or the left loop, and bring it off and over. Tighten. Third cycle, through 2, over, place, through 2, over, place, 2, over. Here comes the loop exchange. So turning and turning. There's a turn to each loop in this loop exchange. Fourth row. Here's the loop exchange. Think of it as tipping your hands up to place the other loop on, and then reaching underneath to get the lower shank, off and over, tighten. And here comes the fifth and last row or cycle. Here's the loop exchange. You tip your palms upward, place, reach underneath, take it off. At this point, all my gold shanks should be uppermost, and this is because that was the fifth cycle, so now I check that. Gold, gold, gold on both hands. That's correct. It's very hard to braid today because it's so hot that my hands are sweaty. It's very awkward braiding. Okay, so that was one. We're really a half pattern repeat. I guess I could continue doing another one. I'll do this very slowly so you see the moves, maybe see the moves better. Let's see. So on the left hand, I go through 2 loops. This is regular, like a regular double braid that I teach in my main tutorial for double braids. It's like a solid rectangle double braid. I take the middle finger loop from above, which gives it a turn. On that hand, it gives it a counterclockwise turn. I could tighten at this point a little bit. I mean, I could do a little quick tightening before I place it. It's up to you. It's not totally necessary. After the exchange, you can do the same tightening. Then the second loop transfer is coming from the other direction. It's usually easier to me if I tip my hand a bit. I go through the thumb loop, through from behind the first finger loop, and then down to make a turned from above transfer. I go kind of down and grab that upper shank of the middle finger loop and pull it through. Shift. I don't know if you saw that. Shift and place directly on it. This loop got a turn in that it isn't very visible, but it got a turn because this is now the upper shank. Gold was upper before, now black is upper. It got a turn in the opposite direction of the opposite rotational direction of the first transfer. Let's see, it's hard for me to see through the viewfinder at the same time as I'm doing this. I'll try and position this one better. So on the other hand now, through 2 loops, taking the middle finger loop, V loop from above to turn it, shift, and place. It got a turn, the black shank is up, and it got a turn it has to get the turn in that direction for this braid, basically from above. I tip my hand so that I can reach down into the thumb loop. That is the opposite direction of the transfer I just did. Down into that loop, down into the first finger loop, and then instead of reaching down into the middle finger loop, I'm going to reach below that shank, pull it through, shifting the middle, the now bare middle finger into the first finger loop. First finger comes out, and then it goes down into the thumb loop, shift, and now The taken loop goes straight onto the thumb loop, and it has received a turn. Okay, so that's one set of loop transfers, and now comes again the loop exchange, in which I turn my hands upward, place this loop onto the opposite finger. Part of the same move, I reach underneath and lift the original left little finger loop off and around the loop that just came through it. Both loops have received a turn. There's a funny thing about this braid in that it's getting into a bit much, but this loop, the turn that it just received actually undid the turn that it got previously. This loop was the first loop to be turned, and it basically has undone that turn. You could be, I talk more about this in the article on my blog that I am making this video for. This video is just an adjunct to the article in my blog, which shows other braids, it shows other color patterns and how to do them. It has a lot more information. You could be super clever and not turn the first loop on this hand and not turn it when it came over here too, but that isn't the way they did it traditionally, and it means you wouldn't do the same thing on both hands, which is hard to remember. It's easier to do the same thing on both hands, so it's sort of a redundant turn and unturn for this loop. Anyway, that is the braid. I will now, there's another pattern I could show, but I think I will just describe it in the blog. There's a pattern you can make with a slight change in this braid where you just have dots coming down the middle, rather like the beginning part here with none of the other pattern. So traditionally this would have been the bottom part of the braid, the bottom surface, and the other surface looks like this. It has actually a slightly different structure on the two sides because of that unorthodox loop exchange, and the line of dots down the middle on this side is a little smaller, and the pattern is more spread out too, because that's just the thing about loop braids. If you turn from above in all your turns, one surface, the lower surface will be wider. So the pattern, I think maybe it's a little more attractive on the bottom. It's hard to say. I like the side the dots are more prominent, the dots down the middle. So let's set that down. There's more information, as always, on my blog, and I will have the links to the blog post below this video. If you click on See More or something on the below the video, you will see the links to my post, which has more information and more about this braid and related braids with the same unorthodox or sort of kind of unbalanced. The loop exchange really results in it adds something extra to the middle of the braid. It isn't quite symmetrical, but looks really cool, and it makes the braid a tad wider and more intricate in the middle. As I showed you before, oh, let's see some of the other examples of this braid. Here's one in embroidery floss. So what I just did is quite thick yarn. Oh, here it is. Here's the yarn I used. The gold was something called Bulino. I think it's out of print. It's nylon wrapped around a cotton core with a little bit of linen. The shininess is nylon, and the black is an old thick cotton yarn. It was called speed crocheting back in the day. This version is made out of embroidery floss. I think that turns out really nice. It's really, the buckshorn braid, I've always wanted to make it and always put it off because I was too lazy to figure out how to do the unorthodox loop exchange as a solo braider for a long time. On this one, I like this side better on this braid, I think, than the reverse. And then here's one with, I think this was embroidery floss and a finer reflective yarn, rayon. This one was fine rayon floss yarn. It's a two-color braid. You can do different variations of this pattern. Oh, this one was kind of fun. It's, was that hemp or linen? This is linen, a thick linen, two colors. Let's see if they have any other interesting ones. This is sort of what the braid would look like if you used the normal loop exchange, except you have to do some kind of funny things to make it turn out flat. It's really it would normally be a hollow braid, or half hollow. Well, I can't remember now. Anyway, I made it. I made it, but I think I had to do something rather odd with my transfers. I'll describe it on the blog, but I can't remember now what it was, to make the pattern come out correctly. But there is the pattern with no dots down the middle. You definitely need the unorthodox loop exchange to get that nice dotted contrast line down the middle. Okay, thank you for watching.